Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got an awesome guest on today who's a Berlin-based designer who studied visual communication under Fred Smeijers, and for typeface design, a master's degree at the Academy of Visual Arts. Please join me in welcoming Roman Wilhelm. Welcome, Roman.
Thank you so much.
You ready for 20 questions?
Oh, yes, I am.
Okay, here we go. Question 1. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
I'm a designer in visual communication and have been working since 2004 and 2005 in Berlin. And I've been specializing in multilingual typography. For the first 2 decades of my work, I specialized in the relationship between Latin and Chinese typography.
Great. And just a quick note for the audience, Roman and I have just met now, but we're kind of running with this typography thread on the show, with Eric Speakerman on the show. It's been really great to see how typography develops. So this is a great extension of that. Question 2, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
It's probably not knowledge, but a quest I am on. I've run into when I started to cope with typography. It's the question as to what multilingual typography may my English is too bad. Can I repeat that again?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you. You may need to do more editing with my interview probably than with the native speakers. Okay, I repeat. It's probably more a question than a piece of knowledge. It's the question as to whether multilingual typography, what kind of role can it play in society? And I've always tried to learn more on that, which had turned out to become the piece of knowledge I can offer to, my clients or my students, to never give up, asking that question again and again. Can multilingual media be more than monolingual media, so to say?
Great, yeah. I mean, that's a super exciting topic for me. I was just in Paris speaking about typography at the Sorbonne, and I don't speak any French, so it was kind of bizarre being there, but great to tug on that thread as well. Okay, so number 3, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
You've just mentioned Paris. I was there too.
Okay.
It was an awesome time, and especially after the years of the pandemic, it was great to meet up again. And in my case, I was lucky that a TypePi took place in Paris. It was not so far away. And the question why I'm doing this has to do with France as well, because I was born in a place in Germany which is very close to the French border, like 20 kilometers, and you're in France. And I've noticed, like, from my childhood on, okay, there's this other country, there's this border, and you cross that border, and there's this other country with that other language. It's a beautiful language. And they got other customs in all ways. So, for instance, I became aware of the different signages they had. Like in Germany, everything was like, the traffic signage was using the DIN typeface. And in France, everything was different. And I became aware of these small differences between, countries and their languages and their visual customs, if you will. So I didn't start from wanting to learn Chinese or, about faraway things, basically, but it started very close to my home and at that French border. And I have to say that in my hometown, used to be a French garrison till 1990. So we had about 30,000 inhabitants, or 35,000, and 5,000 French troops with their families and kids and whatever. So they had a big influence on the city. And until the point, sometimes I tell myself that it's not so much my home anymore because the French are gone. I miss them, to be honest.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually wasn't at the Sorbonne for A-Type I, although I saw that it was happening there. I was there for a humanities conference, but super interesting overlap there. I was at A-Type I as a design student in my teens, 20 years ago. So
okay.
Okay, so number 4, what does your future look like?
Well, I'm now in a position that I can start to do what I want to some degree. I work at university, Berlin University of the Arts, where I'm teaching typography, and in my other life as a graphic designer at the German Institute of Economic Research, which is another world, but they linked closely together. And apart from family and kids, I can settle in to do some more research and try to publish my findings, which is like kind of, my next step. Because, I've always been talking at events such as A-Type I about my research. And now I think the time has come to try to publish this stuff. So my future, my near future is going to be filled up with that. And afterwards, I don't really know.
Awesome. Number 5 is a difficult one for some people, and in many ways, it's the unique question in our set here. But the question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
A lot. I think the idea of places has been crucial to my understanding of design, visual culture, in my case, focusing on that typographic dimension of visual cultures. Wherever I go, I feel at home to some degree. So even as a tourist, spending 10 days at the Baltic Sea side in Poland, which I've done recently, I felt a bit at home. But 10 days is a very short period. So if I stay longer, let's say 3 months, half a year, 1 year, or even more, the place is not strange anymore. So I've found out that my home, the place, I frequently am the place where I work, for instance, or where my kids are. It's a variable concept. I've spoken to some people about that, and not everybody thinks in the same way. So I feel kind of open toward any place I go. And, now with family and kids, I cannot spend so long in other places, but I've done that before. So, for instance, when I was in Hong Kong in 2015 for 2 months as an artist in residence at the Baptist University Academy of Visual Arts, I found myself there just alone in that studio they gave to me for the time, and no other job than just doing this artist in residence project. I found myself digging in that visual culture in Hong Kong, especially after the democracy protests in 2014, which I had to somehow cover, which I had to somehow mention, because I couldn't just be in Hong Kong without mentioning that. I didn't know how. So I ended up doing research on the local aspect of typography in Hong Kong's visual culture. And ended up doing that typeface I call the Hong Kong street face, which is inspired by the what they call road markings, the type on the asphalt for the cars. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I was inspired by that because it symbolized to me something very local, something that's on the streets, something that the protesters had walked upon or camped upon, and and a visual element you rarely find somewhere else, or almost never. So, for instance, like the typeface of Taipei is very similar to that of Hong Kong, but it's still got these small differences. And I felt by that time I'm not very aware of I'm looking for the local aspects wherever I am in typography. I want to find out what makes a place tick in a way. That could be retro. So I always ask myself, am I retro? Or is it something, that young people in that city also think is important for their visual culture or not?
Nice, I like that. At this point, I can't not mention my good friend and previous guest, Keith Tam, who's based in Hong Kong and does great typography work there. You perhaps know that name.
Oh yes, I do. He's one of my oldest friends in China in general. We met. I wrote him an email in 2003 when I was like trying to enter this universe of Chinese typography and had so many questions about fonts, like what font to use and whatever. And so I had the idea to ask that guy in Vancouver, Keith Tam. And since then, we've been exchanging emails, and we met in Hong Kong in 2006 for the first time. So that's when we started even to work together a little bit. We organized conferences and did those type walks together in Hong Kong, which I liked very much. So it's very fun to be around with Keith in Hong Kong. He knows so much about every detail. Just a side note.
Yeah, Keith's fantastic. I kept running into him. I was in Reading and met him at an English pub. He actually taught me fourth year typography 20 years ago at Emily Carr. And I also saw him at PolyU in Hong Kong years ago. Very good friend. Okay, so number 6, if you had to start from scratch, what advice would you give your former younger self?
to start from scratch, if you feel like it, or if there's a need to. I have these I had these moments when I thought, okay, my road is ending in a way. Like I for instance, I lost a job because I had that wonderful part-time job in Berlin with that focus on Chinese, German, communications, and I was doing all that Chinese, German, or English typography for representing the city of Berlin Tourism Board, and things like that, and it was wonderful. But then my boss, who was actually a Chinese, became more and more sick. She had problems with the eyes, and it became apparent that she could not carry this on, and I had to cancel. I had to quit this job. So I applied for a new job and ran into something totally different. It was that, where I still am at the German Institute of Economic Research, which was totally unmultilingual. And, there was no relationship to China or, even let alone other countries. And their research focuses on Germany. So I felt a little alone and asked myself all the time, is it over? Did I make a big mistake? And so it took me a while to realize I had to restart this from scratch and find a new way to express myself, and in a way to continue what I was doing before. So, it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I had to quit this job. So it was a difficult time, and I had to, I it took actually a while till I got the chance to get that job here at Berlin University of the Arts. And I could go there, I could go, have a meeting with my boss and tell her, I have this opportunity. Can I reduce my hours? And it's like that how it works. So they would have said no, but in that case they said yes. So I squeezed out some time to do what I actually wanted. And I think I can encourage everybody by not being patient. If things go wrong in a way, there's always a big chance for you to reshape to reshape your vision of what you're doing. And it's sometimes painful, but it's very important. And another note, I'm such a clumsy person, and I'm so bad in organizing myself. So when my laptop got stolen once, I had backup for all my files, for all my client work. Everything was there, and there was not a big problem apart from the laptop being gone. Until I noticed that the font family I've been working at for years, it didn't have a backup, and I had to restart from scratch, or literally from the lowercase I, and which is what I did. So in the end, the font looked better because I was forced to redo everything. And so it's the only thing I can tell you. There's always a chance when you lose something to do it again. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. So, but do take that chance.
You and I, we have to approach Keith. He's got a podcast of his own now called Visible Signs, Invisible Designs. I was on that show. He does a great job of guiding you through his way of thinking and his way of speaking. So that's a good one. That would be a good one for you.
Absolutely.
Number 7, what's a day in your life like? Did I ask you that? No.
Very different. So I get up early normally when my kid is now my kid is on a holiday, summer holidays, so everything's different. And normally I bring my I have to get my kid out of bed and bring him to school, which is normally we're starting at 8, and so I'm free afterwards to do my job, and either go to the ride a bicycle to the German Institute of Economic Research on Mondays or Tuesdays, and where I work in the office after such a long time of home office during the pandemic. I've always enjoyed working at home, basically, until the pandemic came and I was forced to. So right now, I find myself being happy in that office with my colleagues, which has advantages too. So I'm actually fine with everything now. The focus lies on being present with me, and we have meetings, like in many other jobs, and I am either I'm either producing infographics for our key publication, which is called the IW Wochenbericht, or the weekly report, which has been around since 1929 and run through all the printing techniques, which is interesting, from letterpress to phototype, till the digital age, where we're producing a magazine in print and web format. So I'm producing this magazine in a way with my colleagues together, and making these infographics, and so this is the one side of my daily job. And if it's a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, normally I go to Berlin University of the Arts, and in and either be in my office, teach my students, or take care of our letterpress studio, which we have here. A lot of things to do all the time. So right now, for instance, I have to organize a takeover. So we're purchasing some Leipzig Antiqua lead type from the Potsdam University of Applied Sciences. So we're trying to exchange a bit among letterpress studios around who needs what, and in my case, I'm trying to improve the situation in our little workshop. We got some donations from Speakerman, for instance, and but we need more type. So we're now negotiating with that, University of Applied Sciences in Potsdam as to whether we can get that originally packaged Leipzig Antiqua, never used. So it would become our first serif font family we'd have at hand in several sizes, and not just 24-point Helvetica and 36-point Helvetica bold. So that's the situation we're in now. We don't have a family at hand. And yeah, that's the next thing to do. On the other hand, we're publishing a book on the local aspects of typography, as you mentioned. I think it will be called Here. And it contains interviews with people involved in, typographic heritage around the world, Kuala Lumpur, Shanghai, Malta, and other places. We had an African designer with us who's actually based in Germany, who invented his own script, who invented a script for the language of his home village, and told us about how the development of that very, very local script that only he knows right now. And he wants to go back to his village to teach the kids, this script, so they, less to forget the language. So that's kind of what I'm into right now. And my days are always dependent of, teaching which classes are when, and found out that, it's a bit difficult if you have two jobs to satisfy everybody all the time. So I've run into, I had a meeting with my boss in the other job, and she did start asking me, hey, where have you been? Come on. Are you still doing your job? And so sometimes having two jobs is difficult.
That's funny. If you grow up in Vancouver here in Canada and get educated in typography, in the kind of minutiae of typography in Vancouver, you'll come across the name Robert Bringhurst. Last I heard, he was on an island near Vancouver called Quadra Island, changing oral languages into visual variants. So yeah, I can kind of relate to some of your stories in that way. Number 8, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Asking. I found out I'd like to answer that by another project I'm into. I've been into for years. In my other job, that's the value of my other job. It has on my life. It has to my life. I'm surrounded by scientists, economists, and I've noticed, these are people who try to, obviously ask questions all the time. They're research questions, and try to answer them and try to discuss these answers and share them so they could be proven or falsified. And, they voluntarily enter that discussion, which is what I appreciate very much. So in case you have a finding and you publish that finding and you ask the others what they think about it. And so everything is, part of a debate, and this debate is accessible for everybody, or almost everybody. So I've always appreciated that and wanted to, wanted it to be part of my life. So this lifelong learning has a literal value for me, because I wasn't able at some point to enter that, PhD universe. I was working. I had a place actually in Braunschweig, Germany, where I was able to enter a PhD or doctoral program, but that somehow didn't materialize because the organizational structure of that university was changing exactly at that time. So I had strong difficulties in continuing this path. Another one who did was actually Dan Reynolds, if you know him. He managed to finish his PhD over there. Anyway, I didn't. So I had to ask myself, how do I get this lifelong learning into my life and, stay up to date, as you say. So I can say that this job at that economic institute is kind of my university, because I'm talking and exchanging with scientists every day when we have to find solutions for the infographics I have to make. So it's not like a top-down process. You do that and make it nice. It's not that. So we're discussing a lot of content, how to make the graphics tick, how to make the key content stick out, and how to communicate well what they want to say. So it's a very context and content-based work, apart from the actual questions of design on top of that. So my experience is that, these people are normally not top-down. They don't tell me what I have to do. They're not arrogant. They're face-to-face on, eye-to-eye level, if I may say so. And we're discussing, aspects of these graphics. And I found out, a lot of people among them can deal very well with images. They know partly a lot about visual communication and, the psychology of graphics and, symbolism and, what certain symbols could mean and what do they mean in their community, etc. So I've made very good experiences in working together with scientists. So, and on an eye-to-eye level, and I appreciate and respect that so much. It became part of my, lifelong learning. So I was, as I mentioned before, I had a project I wanted to do, which is a cuneiform font. As a very strange thing to in modern day life, cuneiform, a dead script. I always had a crush on that since my childhood, and I wanted to find a way to make it part of my life at least a little bit. So the obvious choice was making a font, and driven by that spirit of asking questions all the time, I started to get into exchange with the scientific community dealing with this ancient script, the various seminars of ancient Oriental studies in universities through Germany or Europe. And I was blunt enough to ask them, I'm doing this, I'm trying to get into this, but I want to make it usable. What is there? What advice could you give me? What is exactly what you need for your community? Is there anything I could do for you? And, driven by the spirit of, contributing and doing kind of service for the community in order to understand what they need. And some of them did answer, and I'm still in exchange with them. And the project has evolved in a way I would have never imagined before. So, for instance, we're working on an input method for cuneiform, web-based. So it's something we need to tackle. And the font is developing in a way I would have never imagined before, because they tell me exactly what they what they would like to have. And it's a long list of things. I would have never expected that. So it's good to ask and see your project or your ideas changing with that. And this year, I had a very special moment, just like last month, when I first I had the idea to propose. I asked the professor in Göttingen University who whether she could squeeze out some time, maybe an hour. I could come over and ask her directly, talk to her and exchange a bit on the requirements she would like to see with that project, and what could I improve, and speak about the timeline, whatever. So I just proposed I could come over for an hour and we could exchange, and maybe some of your colleagues could be around if they have time. I'm very humble, and so that's what I proposed, and the answer was, okay, why not? You could come around during our summer celebration. How do you call that? Summer, little gathering they were planning for July, and hold a talk about your project for us. And I was very flattered by that. It was the first time, literally, in my life to be outside the design bubble. Whenever I have had talks or workshops or whatever, I was well inside my comfort zone, and this time I just actually noticed it was my first time outside that, and I was very humble. And but it turned out they appreciated what I said. So we had a wonderful day with specialists in ancient Oriental studies. They could read Q&A form fluently, and it was like a dream come true, actually. So it all happened because I was continuously asking questions, which is part of my lifelong learning. If you don't ask, nobody's gonna try to answer.
That's fantastic. I had a response, but I've forgotten it. That was such a great answer. Okay, number 9, almost halfway here. What tools do you use? Are you a digital nomad?
Kind of yes, kind of no. I'd say I'm a nomad. Although now I'm stuck home with the family, which is a different, it's just the way things are, and that's great. Because if you have kids, they have. What bugs me most is school holidays. You're locked to these school holidays for your own holidays. I'd like to go for a trip in September. It's not possible anymore right now. Anyway, but that's not a big deal. I've been working on trains, airports, cafes, apartments, studios of friends. Although I had my own little studio in Berlin all the time, it was a shared place, co-working thing. And so I had a safe place to go. Then my wife has a studio. I can also go there sometimes. And only right now I have offices. It's the first time in my life I do have an office, which is where I'm sitting right now at the university, or in my other job. It's at the institute, of course. It's a real office. So it was kind of new to me to have my own office, and I had to adapt to that much more than the actual idea to work wherever I could. So, of course, I always work on, I'm a laptop guy. Somehow it happened, and I got myself a laptop. And while others also use tablets and much smaller things to do their job, and then set up their screens in their studios, their big screens or whatever, so they connect the laptop to the screens. I don't even have a screen. I just have my laptop because I was so used to do my jobs wherever I was. I was traveling much between Germany and Switzerland, and being part of a multilingual typography research group back then, between like 2007 and 2013. So it was a time I was spending much time on trains, basically, and then I was in China pretty much, for instance, let's say at least once a year, twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, and I had to be mobile, and but yet my artistic, let's say my design and typography is also much linked to calligraphy and illustration. I was a hand drawing nerd, which anyhow, I guess I still am, but due to my new job, I was kind of forced to work with vectors, because otherwise the files would be too large. Anyway, I love to use the digital context, and in a very simple way. But I had a time before that I had to draw. I wanted, much to the surprise of my clients, I wanted to hand draw bar charts per hand, as an illustration. And when they changed the data, like let's say I had new figures coming in for that bar chart, I had to change the drawing. So I was so I had such a fetish on hand drawing that I found out ways to integrate that hand drawing into my digital work. And but sometimes I ran into difficulties, of course, when I was not around in my studio and I couldn't change the drawing, whatever. So I'm more and more I quit that. But and yet there's the dimension of calligraphy and letterpress in my work. So now here in Berlin, I'm so glad to have this letterpress studio I can use with my students, and we can work together in that place. So it's like, take some people, take them to that place. It's in the basement, and typographic spirit is switched on automatically if you want. So that's the power of a place. And I noticed in my migrant work years, if I may say so, I was missing that place a bit. So the place was inside me. And so now I'm happy to have both sides of the coin. But still, the laptop has become the center of my work life, because I do everything I can with it. Let's say write texts. And if I don't take it, I take a notebook and write the text in the notebook, and then have to type it. Anyway, I make music apart from that if I have time, so it's also on the laptop. And of course my jobs are on the laptop, so it's kind of the migrant aspect has remained. I'm here at the studio and have a job to finish for the other side. I do it here, and I have a musical idea. I have some time. Okay, let's switch it on and work on that. So it has. I'm still mobile in terms of work, even if I don't switch places far away.
That's great. Do you know the name Ray Larrabee? We had Ray Larrabee on the show.
Yeah.
I know him from his free fonts that he designed decades ago, but he's based in Japan now doing typography work there. Fantastic typography guest. Okay, halfway, number 10. How do you deal with work-life balance?
The balance is automatic with my kid. So I have to bring him to school. I have to bring him home from school. So after school, normally we go to a playground or have he's meeting friends wherever. So sometimes I go there with him, or take him there and then wait for the time to pick him up again, or like spend time on playgrounds through Berlin. I think I've noticed that Berlin has the best playgrounds, big ones, and you can hang out, and I spend time talking to these other parents, people I wouldn't talk to normally. It's an interesting new dimension for me, and then have to cook food, have to be a father in a way. So it's right now, this is my balance, because there's no other way. So I cherish that, not just for the time I spend with my kid, because that time is never long. He's 7 years now, so let's call it another 5 years, and he would not want me to be around on the playground anymore. So it's a short period of luck, and beside that, I also take it as a strong invitation for that work-life balance. So although it decreases my mobility, of course, I'm very happy to have that opportunity to be, so to say, to be forced to relax in a way. And I've used these opportunities to think about my stuff. And so this is right now. And before I had a kid, there were times I was tired with work, and still are, when everything's too much. Let's say, especially, I have the feeling it's especially in July and December. July is before the holidays, and December before Christmas, and so much has to be terminated, and so many projects have to be finalized, and clients want their stuff before Christmas or before they go on holiday. So I've just spent again the most stressful time of the year, and I really want to change that for me, in order not to break down twice a year, which doesn't feel right. So I want to improve this. Anyway, like, we have that yearly exhibition we call Rundgang at university in July, and school holidays starting in July at the same time, and even before that. And my colleagues in the other job go on holiday. So it's like a huge deadline, and it's locked to these months, like July and December. And I've started to hate July and December just for that, and I think it doesn't feel right. So it's normally the time of the year I start to think about canceling one of the jobs, and it's not the right solution. So my next challenge is to find a workaround, and not let the others mess up with your months and the beautiful time you have. So I think that's a challenge we all face. Anyway, before that time, I was mainly balancing myself with music I make, which is obviously kind of a hobby, although I would never call it a hobby. It's like part of my life and part of my artistic expression, if you will. I had performances. Right now, in the time before the pandemic, I didn't have performances, and didn't have ever since. So I want to change that as well. Have some small performances again in Berlin, in some pubs or whatever. I was doing music for making music for art openings, and my wife's an artist, and sometimes they invited me to perform at their openings, and it was a kind of thing I grew into, this art opening music, if you want. And I want to get back to that. And music gives me a strong balance, a strong sense of balance. If I don't have it, I don't feel balanced. Although I rarely earned a cent with my music, I did, but not so much. So I couldn't make a living with it.
Okay, great. Okay, so number 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Probably music. It's like a thing I've never run into in terms of studying music or studying an instrument, because my main instruments are guitar and accordion. So the accordion is a folk instrument. It's not classic. So it didn't feel right to study that. So, although actually now in Finland you can study accordion as an almost classical instrument, but it didn't feel like my path, and so I never thought about doing this. But I had moments where I thought, okay, this could become a career of some sort, but I felt very attached to the visual side of things, so it felt right to be more a visual designer rather than a musician or a songwriter. And so I'm carrying around these two sides of myself, and it's almost impossible to cast them into jobs. So but that would be probably a thing I would have, a path I could have taken. Probably more interesting for you is the dimension it had in with the visual world, because me and my friends, we were getting more and more into soundtracks and soundscapes and music for movies. So these movies were done by other friends, so never very important stuff. But we had a, how do you call that? A movie with real, we had some animated movies. So, and in contrast, also some movies including, actors. How do you call that? In Germany, we call it Spielfilm. So, like,
Not sure.
the real film. I don't know. And we made our experiences with that. And for instance, with one of those movies, we played the soundtrack or the music live to the movie, like little orchestra for mute movies back in the 20s. So we took guitar, bass, and drums, and we played the music live, and it was recorded live and became the soundtrack or the music for the movie. So we were dealing a lot with instrumental music because it was always in the context of movies. And I think that is an interesting aspect I've always wanted to go back to. But it depends on the people right now. And, people that trust you, you can do that. And in my case, they're not there right now. So let's wait a while and see what will happen. But I've always felt very happy with the universe emerging from music and visual art or design coming together. It's always fascinated me. And as you've heard, even in my typographic thinking, the language is of crucial importance, and the language is a thing you hear as well. It's an audio. It's somehow, of course, related to music as well. So that's how I tick. I cannot divide between the two, although in my jobs, of course, I do.
Well, it's so interesting, right? Because if you think of it as a balance, then balancing the art of the visual with balancing the art of music. So you're kind of balancing arts all the time.
Yes, but you need to make sure. It's a mistake I've often made, and I've found myself becoming aware of that in recent years. You should not overwhelm people with all your ideas. And hey, come on! I'm also a musician. Let's do something about it. Let's do a musical project, or speaking of musicians, hey, I have that visual idea. I'm a designer. Let's work on that. So I've made the experience like, okay, I better do it and stay calm. Apart from, telling everybody what I could do, it can be annoying. So I've become very patient and very timid, not in a negative way, hopefully, but don't bug the people with all your ideas too much. Sometimes you need to do them and you need to show them, hey, this is what I've done. So sometimes this is why my things take longer sometimes, because I want to wait for the right moment, to show this stuff to the others and have some conclusive, something conclusive to show and to share, which is much better.
Well, it's super interesting, right? We had John Maeda on the show, and he does stuff with code, and he does stuff with writing, and he does stuff with speaking, and all of these kind of non-tangible things. And it's super interesting what you're saying, that the making has to have this kind of physicality to it. Okay, so number 12, what would you not like to do with your career?
Advertising for product I don't appreciate, which is, of course, a difficult one, because I've had this dilemma. I was mainly doing advertising for culture, which is an advertising a kind of advertising I was appreciating, because if you advertise for culture, it's a different story than for product. So but as a typographer, mainly in the bilingual world, doing, we were translating marketing material for the city of Berlin, for instance, into Chinese. So my boss, who was a native Chinese, did the translations for all the marketing material, let's say the brochures, and they did that Chinese webpage for the city of Berlin. It was like, right now everything has changed, but back in 2003 or 2004, the idea of having a Chinese homepage for Berlin was totally new, and it had its own domain. So she was basically caring for the contents of this official, web page of Berlin. I think it's unconceivable now, but back then it was adventurous, if I may say so. And we were comfortable, with working between the cultures, but more and more the dilemma with the Chinese government came, joined the game. And from 2005 to 2007, I felt very comfortable. But starting from 2007, in the year before Beijing Olympics, I started to feel slight discomfort. And we were even approached by the government. I had a talk on multilingual typography in Beijing, and someone was around from the propaganda ministry, and she approached us and asked us, hey, we come look at these brochures we made. They don't look fine. Could you improve the multilingual typography of these things? And my boss just told her, I'm sorry, we don't have time. But in the end, like afterwards, she told me, like, look what's that, look at the text, look at the content of this brochure. I totally disagree with everything. And so why should I spend a second to improve the design of this thing? So I was actually lucky to have a boss like that. She was a critical thinker, if you want. And it's, as a designer, you're part of this. And I found myself adding Taiwan to the map of China too many times, you know, because it was just requested by the clients who told me, Roman, sorry, but, you know, you just have to do it. Come on, please do it. So, because otherwise, you know, we wouldn't get a clearance. We wouldn't be able to print this thing. So it's a beautiful project. So it's to the cost of this, you know, if you put that island onto the map, we can print this beautiful book. So it was always to the price of that. And I felt it was probably there was a day when I thought it's a journey too far. I started to disagree and kind of started to back off from these projects. I never refused to add Taiwan on the map, but I just stopped to do this kind of job. And so it is something I would have not liked to do. For instance, being forced to communicate something that you don't agree with in a way. So especially the map of China was always a matter of debate. Let's say I had that map of China and it was beautifully done. And then the client approached me and said, we need to make it smaller because the islands in the South China Sea are not on the map. And when I asked back, why do you need the islands in the South China Sea, which are not important in the context, which are not crucial for the content you would like to transmit? So why should I make the map smaller and ugly? Because these islands have to be on it. They always, you know, shook their heads and said, we have to. If we don't do, somebody may notice. So it's this kind of dimension that I didn't like with my work. And when I say now, I stopped to add Taiwan to the map of China, it's actually not true. I'm just not doing this kind of job anymore, which I feel sad for. But the positive side is I don't have to do it again. So I feel I have a strong sense of that dilemma. So it can be problems with, you know, a product you have. Let's say you're involved in advertising for a company that will spy you out or track your data or whatever, and you feel a discomfort with that. And there's a question always like, can I quit this, or like, can I still, you know, live with it? And I rarely have that in terms of product because I was never into product advertising. But in political, you know, the propaganda also being kind of an advertising, you can face the same dilemma. But to add a side note, I have a friend in Berlin, Andrea Tinnes. She's also a typeface designer and a pretty successful one. And she's a left-wing person, and you know, you can talk to her about socialism, and she found out like a couple of years later, it must have been around 2010, that during the governmental elections in Germany, the Christian Democratic Party, Conservative Party of Germany, had chosen her font for their election campaign. And she was so unhappy with it. She would have loved to, you know, if the Socialist Party would have done the same, she would have been happy, or the Green Party or whatever, but not the Conservatives. So there was nothing she could do. They purchased a license of her font, and I said, "Come on, be happy. They paid at least." But she was very she was very uncomfortable with that. You know, a political opponent, you know, taking advantage of your work, but you know, with you being totally different. So dilemma everywhere.
Yeah, we have that. We have guests who really can't do anything morally or ethically compromising. It's really hard to do, I think.
Yeah, and you have to compromise somehow during your career. And in many cases, you don't realize that you're actually compromising. In my case, it took years to understand that I'm a part of that machine, and I don't want that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, number 13. What's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I have a Chinese word coming to my mind. It's called mama hu hu. It literally means horse, horse, tiger, tiger. I learned it back in Shanghai around 2002 when I asked somebody whether how's the job going, and he said mama hu hu, meaning it means so-so, not really good, but you know, it kind of works, but it's not really good, so-so. And I was inspired by that word so much that I dedicated a typeface for it. It's called Lao Wai Sung. It was my first Chinese typeface ever to emerge on the market. And it's a hand-drawn Sung Ti typeface. And the word mama hu hu resonated so much in myself because it was the way I felt speaking Chinese really badly. And, you know, I had a notion of, why am I doing this? Why am I in China? It's not my comfort zone. I cannot be brilliant here. I can only be mama hu hu. I can never be an expert here. I will always be a rookie. You know, I will never learn Chinese on a native level. I will never be able to negotiate like a Chinese native, and let alone design. I will never be able to be brilliant as a designer when I'm here. So why am I doing this? And the answer was, I feel mama hu hu anywhere. And so that helped me to understand myself better, because actually I was always taking decisions that didn't make sense. So I want to become a typographer. Why do I go to China? I want to become a graphic designer. Why am I learning Chinese? Why am I learning Arabic? Why am I doing all these things? And it was because it was that word coming out of my colleague's mouth that made it tick into place, because I noticed that being imperfect and not fitting to the surrounding made me start in the first place. And it was a situation I brought myself into again and again in order to realize who I am better than, you know, in the comfort zone of your home, or, you know, obvious career choices and things like that. I kind of romanticize, because I don't think I was very conscious of that in the beginning. Only now I can say that. But this has become, at least to some degree, my favorite word, because it helped me to cope with the situation better.
Great. Okay. 14, do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence? By the way, in Japanese.
No, I have one.
Oh.
And it's a sentence I frequently hear. I frequently heard myself. I had to, you know, I was confronted with many times, and then later when I was teaching, found students confronted with it by the professors. So it was the sentence, "You have to decide." And it was always in the context of students, or in my case, it was actually the same. So you have a student and she or he is doing what she's supposed to do, like in our case, graphic design projects, typography, illustration, whatever. So, and when it came to when these projects were presented and shared in the end of the semester for the whole bunch of the professors, I don't know whether in the US it's the same practice as here in Germany. So normally we have a small exhibition, and students present their stuff and talk a bit about it, and professors asking questions, and finally having to decide on a mark. So in this context, I found students telling to the others and the professors, this is my here are the results of my graphic design work, but a part of that I make music, and I have some examples of my music for you to hear if you want, or I made a video of for my music, and would like to share it with you. And in these contexts, and there are other examples apart from music, like students coming from another major, for instance, trying to combine the former major with the new major. And I found professors tell them, you have to decide on what you want to do, either the music or the graphic design. And normally it was me who, like, the damage was done, I felt. But I always, approached the students after the presentations, after the sharing, told them silently, never decide, don't do it. Because I think it's not something up to people in a higher position to say that to anybody. So it resonated with me because I was confronted with that myself, being, into music and into design, and always having to justify, why am I doing this? Why am I spending, part of my time with doing something else? And I would like to some degree, always encourage people to sort that out somewhere else, and not in university, and not in the context of, we're all, I felt pushed to exclusively do and spend all the time of my life doing just one thing, but I couldn't change myself. So, and I was kind of blunt, just continuing. I can do it because I don't know. I found a way to answer back rudely, but other people are not as blunt as me. So they would be more sensitive and probably stop, silencing that other side of themselves. And I feel worried about that. So the idea of decision, deciding on something you want to do, is sometimes productive and sometimes not so productive. And that's why I tend, not to like to hear that.
That makes sense. In my academic world, we have this word called polymath, which means having more than one deep specialty. It's a little bit different. Yeah. Renaissance man is more about deep specialties.
Exactly. To add a little thing, I've just noted in Göttingen, where I was, spending a day at the seminar of Ancient Oriental Studies. I thought, okay, they're the nerds. They read cuneiform. They learn Akkadian and Sumerian, and they know everything about this ancient bubble, if I may call it like that. And a part of that, I spoke to the students, and they told me, one told me she was, also studying Japanese besides. So they all have their other words because they have to. You cannot run into being an ancient Oriental scholar or a scholar in ancient Oriental studies, there will be almost no job options. You have to do something else. And that kind of resonated with me. So why keep on telling graphic designers to exclusively do that one thing? Of course, we have more job options than people in ancient Oriental studies, but it's still like a question I would like to ask all the time.
It's a good one. Okay, number 15, if you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what word would you choose?
A mess.
16, what keeps you up at night?
Troubles with the job, and when I have difficulty bringing together family issues and job issues, and finding myself having, a bad conscience about what I've been doing in my job, having been away or unreliable. I don't like that. And as when I run into these issues, I can't sleep. I find myself being awake at night, thinking about it all the time. And during the pandemic, when everything was so dislocated, when there was no sharing and no exchange, and I was so I was so alone in the family, if I may say that. I started to become it like in 2020, like the news on Hong Kong 2019 were rather fresh, and I was like checking the news all the time, what was going on in Hong Kong after the recent protests, and feeling more and more worried about, like, not just about my friends such as Keith and all the others. What are they doing? How's their life, and what options do I have to exchange with them now? That kept me awake at night as well, and up to the point that I thought, will I ever be able to return to Hong Kong, which is a more egocentric perspective on the actual problem, but it also played a role. Like, will I be always at home now, caring for the family, cooking dishes, and will I be ever able to return to that, to take a plane to Hong Kong or whatever? And at the same time, Taiwan started to become more frequent on the press, and I noticed I couldn't sleep because I was always thinking about what would this government decide. What I was incapable of changing anything, and I realized that very, very dramatically during these days, and it also made me stay awake at night. And but these are gladly the only things I recall, why I was awake at night. It's actually, I'm kind of happy, probably.
You have a dream you're chasing?
I'm chasing all the time. I have a, in my research, I had a dream, and it was to find out how multilingual media, for instance, could change the way we think about each other. Like, let's say, foreign cultures and cultural exchange in a linguistic sense could, as to whether that could improve our behavior to one another. In Germany, we have such a mass of people not wanting to know about foreign countries or other languages and cultures, and wanting everybody to speak just German with them, and it's things I I don't really appreciate. So I think we should always be open. And I thought multilingual typography could play a role in that. So it's kind of my dream to do more research on multilingual typography, because I have that dream. But during my research, I found out that, you know, the multilingual aspect in a medium doesn't necessarily mean it's truer than just in one language. So fake news can be spread multilingually. So I have found historic examples of that, such as the inscription of Bistun in modern-day Iran in 3 languages, telling the same lie 3 times. So I think I've become more sober, and with the continuing research, so I'm kind of killing my dream, but more and more realizing the potential it actually has. And so it's with many things I do or try to do, I am actually killing the dreams for something real, which is much more important to me right now. So for instance, I'm trying to record an album. I call it album because it feels like one. It's not like, probably not a vinyl or something. It's 80 minutes of music, and the music has been in my head partly for more than 20 years. And the album comprises of music I've written whenever I was in China, whenever I didn't have an instrument with me. And so the music started, you know, to emerge from my head. And now I have to get it out of my head and record that stuff. It's a very difficult process. And, you know, in order to materialize that dream, it actually is. So, yeah, that may be the wrong answer, but they asked in an interview, they asked Dieter Meier, who's, you know, the singer of Swiss band Yellow, like a bit bluntly, how do you feel about, you know, all the beautiful ideas you have for your projects and, you know, for your art, and expecting him to say probably, yes, it's cool to be an artist or whatever. But what he did was he said, of course, it's I feel great, you know, when I have a new idea, but 99% of your time, you, as he said, you're in the wall. Do American climbers say it the same? Like, you're in the wall means you're climbing. And as you know, Swiss mountains have steep walls, and the face of a mountain. So he said 99% is you know, the job of climbing. So the idea is just a glimpse of what you're actually doing, and I think he's right by that.
I love that. 18, what inspires you?
Misunderstandings, discussions, things I actually hate. The neighborhood I live in, Berlin, is multicultural. A lot of Arabic speakers around, and Turkish speakers around. So I've noticed, like, you know, the Turkish have been there before the Arabic. So, you know, you could say in one of my neighborhood streets, there was a research on the various shops in that street, and which languages are spoken there apart from German, and how old they are. And they noticed that the oldest store in the neighborhood is a Turkish one. So you could speak of a traditional store, you know, not being German, but Turkish. So it's become as far as that. So the Turkish community is very well rooted in the fabric of this neighborhood. And the Arabic speakers, apparently, you know, they came later on. And I've noticed, for instance, you know, Turkish people complaining about the Arabic people. and, stating that they were rude and, things like that. And I had to listen to that as a German, while I hear other Germans, being hostile to all of them, like not caring about, are you Turkish or Arabic? Just they're foreigners. We don't like foreigners. So I live in that conflict in a way. Although I can cope very well with everybody. I learned some Arabic, and I try to take it as a chance to continue, my Arabic studies. And my son was educated by Turkish, people, and I'm very happy with that. But I see, but the conflict I perceive, with others, and sometimes also including me, it's what actually inspires me to take it as a question that we have to deal with, probably. And in Germany, so many people have decided to just ignore the questions arising with intercultural living together. And it's got a beautiful side, but it's also a lot of conflict involved. Of course, it's not easy. Nobody said it would be easy. But right now, I found many normal people, not necessarily well educated people, but let's call them normal people, average people, being so tired of of just people not exactly like them. And I fear that this development could become more and more popular. So I'm inspired by this multilingual issue, not just because I think it's a great typographic topic, but because of my deep worriedness about German society, and trying to contribute to contradict to that popular image that intercultural potential has to many people. Like, they take our jobs, they take our apartments, and these are myths that are more and more prominent in the political debate in Germany. And I have to say, I hate that so much. But I see it as a chance of speaking up in a way. So I'm dreaming of speaking to the Bundestag, but of course it will never emerge.
Nice. Last couple questions here. Any advice you'd like to share?
Normally I don't have advice. I have questions. But an advice I always give to my students is, don't listen to the teachers so much. It's it's good to to have teachers and to exchange with people normally older than you. It's like a transgenerational communication, and in our case here at Berlin University of the Arts, we have need teachers, and but in many cases, in some cases, you find them top down a bit, and in some cases I hear of professors not accepting other opinions so much, and trying to answering like, you either do it like I say or it's simply not good. So normally these students come to me and ask me, like, what do I think? And in many cases I just say, don't. It's sometimes it's not possible to contradict directly, although I think we should contradict more. And but what I can say for sure is, in the end, it's up to you, and in the end, it's you who will emerge from this situation, and not the professor. He will stay where he is, and you will come out of this, and you will be in a different position. So why should you listen to him literally? And follow your intuition in a way, and it's more inspiring to all of us.
Great. And number 20, the self-promotional question: how can our listeners keep tabs on you? How do we follow you? What should we look at?
Thanks for that. So I'm basically right now, I'm basically on Instagram, which is my most active place right now. My name is Roman Wilhelm, as far as I know. So you can find me on Instagram under roman.wilhelm, like the former German emperor, and which is where I share my ideas and pictures of typography and all stuff I'm into. Apart from, I'm renovating my homepage, which is totally old-fashioned and out of date, and yeah, gotta do something about that. But I think Instagram will be the best place to find out when my new webpage will be ready. And I'm also on LinkedIn and currently building up actually a known homepage for the typography lab at Berlin University of the Arts, but that's going to take some time. And yeah, I hope to publish what we're doing in a better way. So right now, I'm sticking to Instagram.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Roman. It's so great to kind of extend this typography thread in this podcast, calling out some of the key episodes. Eric Spiekerman, Ray Larrabee was a good one, and Keith Tam as well, and many others who kind of continue to populate the show. So glad you were here. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.